I actually got some abuse on the Total Rugby League message board this week. I know. Someone was talking about Gary Schofield. You heard of him. He used to be on this programme. And he will be again in the future. People don't hear when we say all the time he's not got Wi-Fi. They think it's some kind of joke, but no, he hasn't. And they said of this programme, let me find the quote from our friend Ramon Rojo, or Rojo, I guess. I watched Mr. Schofield some time ago on that 4020 thing on YouTube. He seemed to be a popular member of the four-man panel. I never took him to be talking twaddle. Caught up with the more recent 4020 stuff, and he's gone missing. The panel is now down to Phil Kaplan and a large-looking chap I have trouble in understanding. So that was nice. That's nice of Ramon. So it's all positive in the world of rugby league. 4020 not live. Just start the program with having a go at people. At least someone's watching.
Have we already started?
I've started recording. This is how it works.
Because I was sending someone a text just then.
No, that's fine. There's no degrees of. This is not Inside Super League. This is not the Super League show. This is very much rough and ready. There are edges to it.
I was actually on social media saying there was someone on there saying, "Can you please tell us what's in John Davidson's story for those of us who can't access it?" I love that. And I should have come up with more sort of creative responses than "No, we need to eat." That's I haven't really got any further than that so far. But anyway.
Could I just say it's great to have Steve on again, a man who has gone from the most itinerant follower of rugby league to the hermit.
Yes, I'm a lover of the great indoors, Phil, and you could always probably see more rugby league in front of your screen, which is a revelation to me after going to 100 games a year, the things you could see if you stayed in front of the TV. But now you can only see it if you stay home. So it has been a complete switch of positions and philosophies, and I'm quite comfortable right here in my Leeds in Crisis t-shirt.
I mean, thanks for wearing the merchandise, which does get a mention in my column this month, which I'd forgotten to write and still have to finish. But don't tell Phil that.
I never heard a thing.
I mean, last time, Steve, you were with us was back in the Radio Yorkshire days when you were plugging your first book, and now you've got another book to plug, which we'll talk about later because there's plenty to talk about with that. How have you found 2020, the generic opening question on all podcasts these days?
How have I found 2020? Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, are you talking about from a rugby league point of view, or are you talking about
the whole perspective?
No, I don't want to get too philosophical. I mean, my thought when it started was that the contagion is us, and we've been polluting this biosphere, and I really believe that it's the contagion is just an antibody, and we're actually the bad thing. So I think we've been kind of kept in control like a bad rash over the last sort of 8 months. We've stopped flying and stopped driving as much, and we stopped playing rugby league. I'm not sure whether that went against the interests of the planet or not. I'm not sure. But yeah, so I found it interesting to be a bit detached because I wasn't going to and from work every day. So my routine didn't change very much. So a lot of the interest was actually in the impact it had on other people and the way it has affected them, and kind of like more almost a bit of Schadenfreude where, this is how I live. You know what I mean? I just go to the post office once a day. That's an adventure for me now. So, and that was the case before March. So yeah. So I found it intellectually intriguing, endlessly fascinating would be the best way to sum it up. Yeah.
And from a rugby league perspective, which of course is the opposite end of the philosophical spectrum.
From a rugby league perspective, I found the goings on in the NRL really interesting as far as them, they're being very brash to come back early, and also the sort of amorality of the TV networks who just said this is a great opportunity to pay you less money, and in this country, I guess it also has summed up where the game sits, where basically they kept playing games just to pay the bills so that everyone else would survive. So and the two competitions couldn't reflect the two countries, aside from the two, the status they are in the countries, but actually the countries, because in the NRL they didn't have a positive for the entire season, and in this country we only went about 2 weeks without a positive. So that was an interesting window on how dangerous it may or may not be to go outside. If I'm in Australia and I'm deciding whether to go outside, I watch the NRL and I'm like, oh, I think I'll go outside. And if I'm reading Super League news reports, I'm sort of nailing up the door.
I think I'd love to know, not to reasons of kick the Owl League app or anything, but how many people watched Wakefield versus Huddersfield on a Thursday afternoon? Because I know I was one, but I'd love to know how many people watched that game just for the sake of a game which did it mean anything at that point? No, I don't think it did. Apart from Luke Robinson getting a wing.
We actually broadcast that game in Australia because Jimmy Smith, who you remember from his days at Salford and from several clubs in Australia and is now a media personality, just like us, he and I, mainly him, I spotted that there was an opportunity there because the games that aren't on television in this country, there'd be a market for them in Australia. This is before our league, before lockdown, and we had one glorious weekend where we showed Wigan and Cass from Cass on a Friday night, a non-televised game into Australia. And I must admit, I had tears in my eyes, and to think that you could think of something like that and then you could actually do it. Being a journalist all these years, all you do is think of things and write them down, and then you just go to the pub. So
not sure.
Yeah, not anymore. Yeah. So and of course, then everything happened, and since we've got back from since the games have been back, initially we could show the games, but there was a lot of toing and froing, negotiating, and there was no contract put in front of us. So Jimmy, mainly, but I agree, supported him, took the view that until we could actually, have a contract and everything is down in paper, we wouldn't be paying someone in Sydney to come in and organise a broadcast, and there was no opportunity to make any money really, because no one, as you said with your question, who watched it, who in Singapore would pay to watch it, you know what I mean? So that's where I think some people who knew about that little business venture might be curious as to what happened and what happened to the broadcast. But that's the answer. We just decided after we got the security right. Where at first there was a problem with security. People were hopping on VPNs here and watching it, and and for me, who's never been involved in that sort of thing before, it's quite a traumatic time for me to deal with that and the fallout from that. But then we fixed it. We got the security right so that you couldn't get on the VPNs. But then we got to the point where there's no contract. There was no way to make money. We still had overheads. So we decided not to continue, hopefully next year.
I think there was a key phrase in there that probably sums up 2020 as well, and where Rugby League is, which also includes, no doubt, debate we'll have about Toronto, even though I did have a very nice letter this week from a gentleman who said don't agree with a single word that the magazine or the programme says about Toronto, but we have to keep revisiting it. But the opportunity to make money, I mean, clearly what coronavirus has done is focused on the models for financing sport. Not just rugby league. I mean, you look at some of the issues clearly that have beset football, and you'd think that even at the very top table of that was never going to have a money issue. But there are financial models built on sand. We're just talking to somebody earlier this week about Taz Battieri being one of the victims of the cull of people at the NRL. So they've finished the season. They've had a fantastic reaction to taking the competition on, and clearly they've had to get rid of a fair amount of staff. I believe 150 people, I think the last I heard, had been victims of the employment cull, and he, who's done such great work on the development side, is one of them. So I think how can you make money out of rugby league is a question that was further exacerbated by watching the grand final. Because you come away from that with two feelings. One is, that's why I love this sport. There have been holes in the road for the whole of 2020, and the players have consistently been the ones that have filled them. And then you think, But if it's so good, and if the world can now see what maybe we can see, why have we never been able to sell it? And it's that double-edged sword that you're euphoric with what you managed to, claim to witness by having the good fortune of seeing it unfold in front of your eyes, and all the evangelical statements you've made in your life about this is the sport for anybody who loves sport. And then you think, will anything change? Can anybody make money out of this? How do we best capitalise on this? What's the follow-up for this? And Steve will have seen that even, well, certainly as many times as I, probably more, because he's done it on both sides of the world.
Yeah, there's two things in there: how to make money from rugby league, and the other one is the sort of grand philosophical: how do we sell this? I mean, I saw little slivers of crisis equals opportunity in tiny little ways. The tiny ways were things like, for the first few weeks of lockdown with Mascord Browns, I was getting 10 orders a day, and I was going to the post office, weighed down and doing my back in, because people were stuck at home and they were just buying rugby league stuff. Big League in Australia fell over, which was the weekly program covering all the games, and there's a website called leagueunlimited.com. They, men and women after my own heart, started doing a PDF program to cover for Big League's absence. Then we started printing it, and that was a fantastic experience, for me, to get involved at something like that. I've looked at the back benches and the designers and all that from a distance for 25 years, and so to get my hands dirty and produce a magazine and sell it, and Phil, you do that every month, and it's thankless, but you hold it up at the end of the month or the week, and you go, wow, for better or worse. So I did that. So that was a bit of crisis equals opportunity. As far as on a very, very small scale, whether those things survive COVID coming back, will Big League come back next year? We're not doing Mascord Browns next year, but whether it's worth my while to continue in that industry, I don't know. But that was an opportunity for me to learn new things. But anyway, it's not about me. On the bigger scale, the game in this country being on its knees, should have been and still might prove to be an opportunity for some outside interests, be it venture capital, be it the NRL getting involved. So, I think maybe you only answer those questions in the most dire of times, and I think the jury's still out as to whether they may be answered as a result of this period in this country.
The grand final, then, you were there, Phil. Good on the telly. I know some people would have preferred more tries and everything, but sometimes defences are on top, as they were in this one. And we had potentially, because you don't want to go early and say this is the greatest thing that's ever happened in the history of rugby league. There's never been a finish like this, blah, 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 blah. But it's certainly one that will be remembered for a long time to come.
I think we arrived at Hull and thought there's an element of relief. We managed to get to the date that had been set. Enough games had been played to make it credible. Before all the lights were turned on and the show was unveiled, it was a question of, can we get to the end of the 80 minutes and just put our hands up and go, that was enough? And perhaps it would have been. We got the top two teams there. They played the best regular season round, and I think we were all thinking 80 minutes and we can put the pens away for 2 or 3 months and see where the sport takes us. There's a couple of big decisions coming up in the next month or so, and basically, as Steve sort of hinted at, do you reset? Can you get out that blank sheet of paper? Is this one of those times, like he's writing about in Two Tribes, that occasionally you'll look back in the history books and there'll be those moments where 1895 happened, 1995 happened. Is this another of those potentially on the horizon when you look back? And then at the end of the sort of 82.5 minutes, if you include the video replay of that extraordinary last couple of sets of 6, you think this is more than that. You've just been privileged to be at a sporting occasion that will be replayed over and over again, whether you're a rugby league fan or not. It was our Aguero moment. I think that was said almost instantaneously. It happened in the ground, particularly by reporters that cover football as well. You can analyse it as much as you want. You can point to the magnificent stats of some of the players on both sides, but that was pure theatre. That even transcended sport. You know, that Zach Hardaker's goal kick fell marginally short, and with probably we thought maybe 2 or 3 tackles left, as it turned out, virtually one full set, a team would go 100 metres and come up with the most unscripted of finishes to a season that you've not been able to tell from one week to the next how it was going to finish. It was the most fitting climax, and it was the most dramatic. I think because we got that, we're just all incredibly lucky to be involved in a sport that can produce that.
I thought it was the greatest thing I've ever seen. I'm not scared of sweeping statements. I mean, I thought I was, you know, I sat here on the couch and I had a few beers and I was quite emotional by the end of it. You know, after the year we've had, I mean, and all the things that we say about the game and the way we get down on it and the way we have already been in this program already. We've only been going for 15 minutes or something, and we're always saying what's wrong with the game, and yet, people say the players save us all the time, but the game saves us. You know what I mean? So, there's something about the rules. There's something written into the. That's the thing, isn't it? That's the key thing, which I hope to get to the bottom of in the book. Is some people think the magic is in the places the game is played and in the classes who play it, and if we share it around too much, we'll lose the magic. If we have Perth playing Paris. Then that's not really rugby league, you know. And so the deeper question when we have these schisms is what really, you know, is rugby league, and that I think that was, you know, last Friday night. That's when you can have a video in the dictionary, when you can just point. You know, do they even have dictionaries anymore? But you know, that is what you point to. That's what rugby league is, and it isn't restricted to a place or a class or a time. You know, it's just something that's codified. It's in the rules. It's in the pay. It's in the history. It's in the vibe, the mood, the observances, the traditions. They all sort of coalesce, and they produce occasions like that last. There's just it defies any further intellectual analysis. I think it was just a piece of magic. It was we were touched by greatness just by watching it.
I think the only you mentioned, you know, how often do you see things like that, and is it the greatest ever? I can remember feeling similar watching the 2015 NRL Grand Final and the Thurston moment, if you like, and this ranks, you know, of its at least its equal. In terms of sport and drama, it's the water splash of the modern era. In that you can imagine the primary host broadcaster will be rolling that out, that, you know, that climax out as often as they need to in generations to come, and I think the stories behind it made it as well. You know, the absolute broken emotions on one side, and I tell you what was strange being in the ground. Clearly, there's no crowd. So the atmosphere you would normally get at a moment like that, you're almost shocked that it's taken place in virtual silence. But all of the St Helens players crowded around the big screen, and on most of the games that have been televised, there hasn't been a big screen. And they watched this replay unfold, and the euphoria with which they jumped on each other and shrieked and hollered and leapt. There may well have been 70,000 people and all the equivalent there. It was absolutely unbelievably raw, dramatic emotion, and it's hard to find the words to describe it. It's hard to even give you a flavour of what it was like at that moment, but it meant so much to that group of players who'd worked so hard to get to that's almost the essence of sport.
I am mindful that we don't want to shove a 19-year-old into the spotlight and make too much of him, but the presence of mind to A, chase up the kick, B, power Bevan French out of the way, and C, put the ball down to win the grand final for, you know, your club. It's a shame that Jack Welsby hasn't been all over the TV just to tell his story, you know, on the breakfast news or whatever. I mean, I've not seen him. Not that I watch either channel, because there's people on either side I can't stand. But how do we capitalise on, Steve, you just said it's the greatest thing you've ever seen. How do we capitalise on that and get more exposure?
Well, it's difficult at the moment, isn't it, mate? Because you're not allowed to someone, and everything's been done the way we are. We're just doing it because we've got no money. But even media outlets who do have money are doing it this way. So it's very hard to do. I mean, also what you said about putting a 19-year-old in the spotlight, I violently disagree with that, because that's the job. That's what you sign up for. You're a professional athlete, and really in normal times, Betfred would be putting him on the talk show circuit. You would hope for a week at least, or radio, TV, just shove him down the throat of every producer. But you can't do that at the moment. So it is that, and again, it speaks to so many different things. It speaks to me with how the game here is just locked up tight, culturally and in the media, where people in this country think they know what rugby league is, and they think they don't like it. And the only escape for me is outside the borders of England. To me, I've been coming here since 1990, and I can't see that level of recognition that you're discussing for Jack Wellesby or for St Helens or for the grand final eventuating. And I know I was here in 1990 and 1994. Not in 1990. I missed the Kangaroo Tour. I was here earlier in the year, and then 1994 I was here with the Kangaroos. And I saw billboards here in London, and I saw back pages in the Nationals. But that's gone backwards, and I just can't see, with the atomisation of the media, with everyone having fewer reporters on staff, with budgets shrinking, I can't see them suddenly again taking an interest in a sport that's been steadily declining for the last 30 years. I can't see an escape within the borders of England for the sport in this country. But what I saw was a small sport that had an opportunity that no other sport did, to reach an audience that other sports in this country can't, because how small it is, and because the sport's non-existent in North America, particularly. So there were no boundaries to break down. There were no local leagues to get their noses out of joint. It was a blank slate, and that's where I saw the opportunities for the game in this country. But the people running Super League and the Super League clubs didn't see it the same way.
I think you're right about Wellesby. I think I think what we've said during here on this programme is that we marvel at some of the young talent that is playing in the NRL, because that's really the only benchmark that we've got. As you say, there's 800 full-time professional players, and the best and majority of them play in the NRL, and we are the competition of the Northern Hemisphere. But we had a kid who 2 years ago was leading the England Academy, beating the Australian schoolboys, and we've lauded some players who were in that Australian schoolboys team. And the one I picked out this year was Stephen Crichton, who I thought had the most fantastic year for Penrith, played in a grand final, didn't quite win it. We've got a kid here who has even superseded that, and we have to sell him. And it almost, he gives up his right to be sold by playing in this competition and doing something like that. So he has to do it. And I think that, if this should be a programme that celebrates the fact that we've witnessed one of the great moments in the sport, and everything else that comes from that can be discussed at a later date. But selling Jack Wellesby on the back of that is something that we need to find a way to do. I think that clip, I get Steve's point 100%. We're not going to get a lot of people going to sit down and watch 80-minute games and take a team and get passionately involved in this sport. But when you've got a clip that is as dramatic as that, then you can sell that. And if you can sell that it's a 19-year-old kid, and if you can sell the ethos that the very last play of the very last game, he chased a lost cause and it proved to be the winning one, that's a great story that you could tell on any sporting network, any sporting radio station. Anybody who writes about sport, any feature. You ring Jonathan Liu or Donald McRae and offer them Wellesby at the moment, they'll write a feature about him, because it's not about the sport, it's about the story and what it represents. And I think we need to learn to do that better. And that isn't the blame of St Helens, who I don't think could have done much more in the euphoria of winning. I think that the game needs to decide how best it promotes itself, and it had and has still the opportunity to take a young kid and make them a poster boy.
That 2 minutes of action from Zach Hardaker's kick to the try, it's not on the BBC website, and this is not a dig at the BBC before people go on that high horse, but every week, every day, they've got clips of Major League Baseball through the season, the NBA, the NFL. Yes, the highlights of the game are on there. But as you say, we're living in a society where people want to see 90 seconds, 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 10-second clip of something. It's not there. Someone at Super League should be putting that clip. I know it's on their own social media, but that's only talking to ourselves. We need to talk to a wider world and show them this amazing moment of sport. Even if 1% minus 0.1%, I don't know how many people go on and watch a game in the future. At least there you're promoting an amazing part of the sport rather than just some Burke acting an idiot on social media.
Yeah, but I know they have secondary rights, but it's not their content. So it's primarily a Sky a property, and the BBC with a long off season ahead. Why would they bend over backwards to promote a Sky property? They put the match highlights up there. It's not there. It's not.
Well, the only thing I would say to that, Steve, is they promote baseball and they have no rights to that.
Mm.
So yeah. that's my only argument to that. But you're right. Why should they do that? Why should they do that and not whatever?
If they've got the highlights up there, though, like those little clips of they're either the purpose of them is a fan saying wow, or a rights holder saying watch my stuff. Like it's from a news point of view. If you're doing I might be wrong, Phil might correct me, but if I'm doing a news report on that F1 clash, right? I'd be giving it context. If I'd be doing, I think there's also metrics that say that 3 minutes or more on social media plays better, reaches a bigger audience than 30 seconds. So if I was trying to get people to come to my social media or to stay on a page long enough to read an ad, I wouldn't be putting 60 seconds, 30 seconds up there. I'd be putting 3 minutes with some highlights up there. Whereas if I had the rights to that, then I'd go, oh wow, look at this, because I'm going to earn money elsewhere. I'm going to earn money from subscriptions next year when you sign up to watch that next year. So I would say that would be the reason.
What I think is interesting is 2 points. One is Sky's secondary play of that, which focuses solely on James Graham and his reaction to waiting for it to come through, and all the wait as he prowls up the touchline. That was brilliant. That's the kind of content that I think anybody who follows any sport can relate to. The other thing is Fallon Sharrock, who clearly, to quote our good friend Rod Studd, broke a glass ceiling with what she did in darts. Now, the way that was handled on social media by Sky and the other media outlets that picked that up, I think that there is a case there for saying there's something there that we could do a little bit better. What I don't want to do is this program to degenerate into something that it doesn't need to be, because I think for once we've got something to, amongst ourselves as rugby league fans, absolutely celebrate. And I think we need to focus on James Bentley making 69 tackles, and we need to focus on James Roby being man of the match, and we need to focus on some of the extraordinary performances by the Wigan players in defeat. Sean O'Loughlin's dignity in the way he handled the whole occasion, and Saints' for giving him the guard of honour when he came up. There is so much good to celebrate. The fact that Joe Burgess played on with a broken jaw, and Alex Walmsley played on one leg. All of that, I think we should be focusing on tonight, and not necessarily getting bogged down in how do we sell the game better, because I think there's a bigger issue there that Steve's written so eloquently about North America, and that it isn't necessarily about the name of a team or possibly the name of an owner. It's about how you perceive yourself as a sport. And I think that debate is going to continue, and clearly whoever the 12th team is and wherever they are geographically located will bring that all back into focus over the next 10 days. But this was just an 80-minute. I mean, I don't, just going back to what you were saying about some people didn't enjoy the game. I don't see that. I don't enjoy that game. You know, we are begged on this side of the world for origin standard intensity and defence in our sport as the ingredient that is lacking for our international teams to be competitive. And for 79 minutes and 45 seconds, that's exactly what it was. It was so gripping, so absorbing that great teams cancel each other out in any sport, particularly in the final of anything. You know, the number of World Cup soccer finals that are 0-0 because the best players are on the field, but they're all the best players. Therefore, there are no gaps. You know, the Rugby Union World Cup finals that, you know, have come down to one moment of brilliance because for the other 79, the forwards have just been so good that they've denied the opposition. We had all of that, and yet we came up with a climax that, because of the rules, because of the qualities of the guys that play the game, because of this never say die spirit, was fantastic. And I just think this is the time to focus on that.
Not only that, Phil, I think it's an important point to be made. I thought on Friday night, and I've been, particularly in recent times, you know, as critical of Super League as anybody, you know, we all think that the governance is wrong, and that they make decisions for the clubs and not the game and all that sort of stuff. Okay, Super League covered itself in glory last Friday night. Sky TV, everyone loves to complain about referees and telecasters. Sky TV covered themselves in glory last night, last week. The way the ground was lit, the fireworks, it looked magnificent on television. It was better or as good as anything the NRL done. The pictures afterwards were emotive and powerful and emotional. The commentators did a great job. They highlighted the right things almost always. The interviewers didn't miss a beat. You know, the players were open and frank and again emotional. And you know, we can all have a joke about Papa John's, but you know, Rodri Jones was also responsible for the way that they, along with other people, the way that they arranged the stadium last week, so that it actually the entire stadium was a stage last week. So I really think that, you know, they cop brickbats, but I think they also deserve to get compliments as well, and they've never deserved compliments, Robert Elston down, like they deserve for what happened last Friday, along with the players.
The grand final always does feel like a more modern event than the Challenge Cup final. That's not to say that the Challenge Cup final was bad or anything, but it just feels more traditional. The grand final always appears to be more modern, the way it's staged, the dressing of the stadium and the pitch before the game, and Friday certainly was. It felt like a big event. It felt like our Super Bowl, and both teams obviously gave us that intense encounter we've been waiting for all season. Steve's gone and said it's the greatest moment he's ever seen. Was it the greatest grand final we've had in the modern era?
Well, of here or Australia?
I don't forget Australia, because you have had a million.
I went to the first one. I don't think there's another one on the. I think it's first, second, and third as the best Super League grand final since the first one. You know, back in '98, was it '98? Yeah. So, you know, I'm writing a book about it. I should know that, but yeah, I think it's first, second, and third. But you mentioned about the modern event. If I wasn't going to call this book about the 1997 season, Two Tribes, I'd call it Fireworks in the Daytime, because that was a sort of one of the hallmarks of trying to sort of jazz up rugby league in that period, was to have fireworks, and it didn't matter if you could see them or not. So you'd have 3 o'clock kickoff and there'd be fireworks, and I think that really is the reason that it seems like a more modern occasion, because you can just do more at night. It's just better visually at night than the afternoon, you know.
What it did highlight, and again we've talked about events, the need for events, is the fact that the Challenge Cup final was a triumph this year for almost different reasons. A different game played in the afternoon at a national stadium. There's more pomp, history and circumstance attached to that. Interestingly, in the grand final, normally the teams run out and kick off. That's one of the distinguishing features, as well as it being at night under floodlights, is there is no introduction to dignitaries beforehand. There is no major playing of anthems. It's like, get out there. This is the climax of the season, and let's play 80 minutes of rugby. Whereas the Challenge Cup final is built around what it's historically stood for. And I think you got that contrast more than ever this year. And both the BBC and the way they staged the Challenge Cup final and the game it produced, which was probably more open, but again, a point in it and equally as dramatic in its way. And the grand final, which was more staged this year than it ever has been. You know, when you've got to sell out 75,000 stadium and you're on Sky on a Saturday at 6, there isn't a lot more you've got to do to promote that. Whereas this year they had everything to do to promote that, because it had to be a televisual event. It was no point. You will have had a better event watching it in front of the screen than those who couldn't feel their knees after an hour watching it in the stadium, because that's how it had to be this year. And I think that both of those organisations deserve enormous credit. And then on the icing on top of that is the fact that the players of all those 4 teams that took part in those occasions came up with something that belied the fact that there was nobody there to witness their effort. It is the greatest grand final we've ever seen, because it had both elements of the sport. And again, you're absolutely right. There aren't many people that have said they were turned off by what they watched. I know one who's won an awful lot of caps for Great Britain, who rang immediately in the aftermath saying it wants to watch defence, it's points that now. And you go, no, the balance of that had everything.
Adrian Morley.
Yeah. If he said it, I'd agree with him. But I just thought it would, just go back to that last, minute and a half. The decision to go for goal in the first place was, people will forever say now it was the wrong decision. But of course, at the time, you couldn't win whatever decision you made. Clearly, I don't think Zach Hardacre would have taken on the kick if he didn't feel he could get the distance. And he virtually did. It was just slightly to the side of the posts. The fact that then St Helens had the ingenuity to get to the right part of the field to at least try a drop. The fact that the drop goal went to a guy who only drops goals in a grand final. Tommy Makinson's not the guy, if you drew up a list of 1 to 5 of people who'd be attempting a drop goal to win a game, who would have the ball in his hands. And it was such a superb one that actually it was almost too good. And then for the ball to bounce down, and Bevan French, who probably was the most likely player in the Wigan ranks to break St Helens open. They did really well to close him down for a lot of the night, but every time he got his hands on the ball and in space, he was the danger. You could tell that it was going to revolve around him. For him, just in the blink of an eye, to be deciding what it was he should be doing, and for a young teenager to steal his thunder, I just don't know. Steve's written all his life, brilliantly. Could not write that. It was one of those, sit back in a chair and go, open a bottle of port, get out a cigar and just revel in it.
No, but don't you sometimes, you're watching a game like that and you go, something's going to happen here. Some crazy shit is going to happen here. You know what I mean? Like, and like a minute and a half before that happened, I had that feeling. I just like, it's going to go into extra time, but more than that, something more than a golden point's going to happen, because it just had that thing. Like I tweeted about it at halftime, just saying this is what an incredible spectacle it was. And you just, if you watch enough games in your life, you can smell them. You can smell them coming. You know what I mean?
I think we were reconciled to golden point in the stadium, which of course would have been a first. And I was just reveling in all those that had to file on the whistle, who were about to jump off the top tier of the KCOM stadium and then had to rewrite everything anyway. But I think we thought this is great, because the 1 year that we wanted something exceptional, we were going to get the first golden point grand final, and we never got there.
Disappointment. We're all looking forward to that history-making moment, and now we'll just have to make do with the greatest finish we've ever seen. Always wanting more. Always wanting more. I'm trying to work out where to go from here. Unless there's anything else you want to say about the grand final that hasn't been said.
It defied description. We've just spent 40 minutes trying to do the impossible, to describe the indescribable.
I'd just pick up on a point of Steve's by saying that the post match was almost as impressive as the game. It said nothing I'll ever take from the game, but I think in that moment of high drama, to be able to ask the right questions, to elicit the right, I mean, Jenna Brooks's interview of Adrian Lamb was theatre. I mean, her intention was not to make Adrian Lamb burst into tears, but when he almost did, it's like there's a perfect interview there. James Graham, who clearly didn't want to be interviewed because he wanted to be making sense of what had just happened and running off and hugging all his mates. Almost he's giving the interview while he's backing away from giving the interview. You balance that against, our good friend and columnist Louis McCarthy-Scarsbrook turning John Wilkins' interview into pure slapstick. You add in a couple of expletives, which nobody really bothered to apologise for, which they shouldn't, because it's after the watershed. And when you've been involved in something like that, that's the least you should be allowed to do. But, that's what made interviewing those people, that human interest angle that we anybody who writes craves for. And I just thought that all of that, a day later, BBC showed the highlights and their version of it, it still was as effective, dramatic, raw. And if I was going to add one thing, which is around the grand final but not about it, everything around how Rob Burrow was handled just added another layer. We don't need to go into detail about who's doing what, and I think the coverage Kevin Sinfield today and what he's doing is just exceptional, and the fact that the money on his Just Giving site has exploded since he did his first marathon, great. But I mean, having that documentary to bookend it, and everybody talking about Rob, the program being in aid of MND research, I think everything that Super League did, that the people who were around the event did, just hit exactly the right note.
I'll say on Brian Carney, he's not the most polished TV presenter out there in the way that Mark Chapman and Tanya Arnold are, because they're broadcasters. That's what they've always done. But there's something about Brian Carney that you can't teach, and that's why he's really good at what he does. And I really enjoyed that post-match stuff as well. Does Jenna Brooks ask better questions because she's Australian? They're not scared to offend people.
Are you asking me that? I don't know. I mean, she's learned her trade over here, so I wouldn't say the fact she says Castleford instead of Castleford has any... I actually say Castleford because I always go with the locals. If they say it that way, that's how you say it.
The president of the RFL says Castleford, so, and none of us will ever dare criticise St. Clair, so...
Yeah, okay.
So it's a sore point, but it's okay. Phil's opened the door for me to mention darts because you mentioned Fallon Sherritt there at the World Championship last year, and this current situation with the bidding for Super League, with everyone putting together their very nice celebrity endorsed videos and this and that. Of the splits, which was the BDO in 1993, didn't want to allow professional players to make more money and sponsors to make more money and more events to be on TV, and hence the World Darts Council was formed and it became the PDC. And now in this year where they can have no crowds, they're still financially stable because they've made a fortune in the last few years selling out arenas for people sitting 10,000 rows back, not able to see a thing, but still paying 25 quid to go watch darts. Are we in that situation now where the BDO then wanted to keep the game for their committee men and counties and all the old-fashioned stuff, and we need I'm asking this as a devil's advocate, a fresher approach, a more business-like approach to make more money and make things better going forward.
I kind of think it's interesting because I part of me thinks that Super League, some of the head honchos of Super League are sitting back laughing at the media speculation about, you can buy them for a tuppence now because they're struggling so much, because they know this venture capital money's coming and they're just laughing at us now. But assuming that that's not the case, of course they need it needs to be ripped up and done again. And of course they need the players don't need to be playing as many games as they're going to be playing next year, and of course we need more teams winning the comp and making the grand final than we have now. All those things that we talk, I watch, I'm a viewer, so all the stuff that you talk about each week is true. The question is, which the way we started this program, is whether the current malaise is created the environment where someone's going to come along and do this stuff, and we don't really know. We've read that the NRL are interested in buying Super League. I just wonder, what would that entail? What does buying Super League mean? And what would happen if they tried to impose an NRL style, like an integrity unit here, where they caught paper bags to players in McDonald's car parks? If everyone's spending the same salary cap, I know they've got marquee players and blah, 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 then I think, just as someone, as without first-hand knowledge of what's going on, that salary cap enforcement is one of the big things that can create parity. And so I'd be really interested to see if the NRL actually sort of basically took over Northern Quarter or wherever they move to, if they get back together with the RFL, if the NRL swept into that office, what they do and what impact it would have on Super League.
I think the key here is what it's always been, and going back again to the time that Steve's currently investigating, it's money. The only thing that talks is money. And this sport here will only change with a huge injection of capital, and that's not reliant on owners. And huge is also a relative term, because huge in the sense of Premier League football is about an elbow. But to take a big minority sport and inject some cash into it to make it a small major sport, in terms of overall investment in the sector, is not huge. And I think that we have a lot of owners who have done astonishing jobs to keep their clubs going, who would now like a return on their investment. And to get some third party coming in who might see the value of what this could be and realise that for a very limited amount of money could take it somewhere else, I think it now has become actually more interesting than it probably was before coronavirus, which is not to decry in any way the efforts that everybody's made to get through it. It actually possibly makes the whole thing a little bit more exciting, and it also brings people together that maybe the NRL have now realised that they can't go it alone, that they might be the biggest fish in the pool that they swim in, but they can't expand that pool on their own. They could put another team in Brisbane or New Zealand or Perth, but would that actually change a lot into, the Pacific Islands is probably more of an important development area for them than, put another team in another city. But if they were to use the Super League footprint to get into North America, and they feel that that's a valuable market that perhaps Super League hasn't exploited the way they would have done, if they feel that China is a place that they could get into now, because
bad timing in Australia, Phil. Bad timing.
Yeah, but but maybe it's perfect timing. Maybe it is perfect. Now,
we're almost at war.
But you know what I mean. That I picked that deliberately on the basis of the fact that that it's timing like this that entrepreneurs love. It's seeing an opportunity and saying, for what is relatively risk-free investment in terms of the amount involved, we could be, if you're on the bottom rung of something, the returns are much greater than trying to buy in when the ladder's already right at the top. So I think, you know, is it coincidence that the NRL and Super League are starting on the same weekend this year for the first time? Who knows? If you're a conspiracy theorist, it's the first step to getting the NRL to buy a portion of Super League. I just think there is a willingness now for the competitions to work closer together and to see that there is a limit to what they can do in their back garden, but there's perhaps a bigger world over the hill that they could go and, you know, plant a tree in.
Yeah, I think the way it was explained to me that if sort of venture capital investment, they like to buy in low because then they have to, like 51% of Super Leaguers, they want that to be not much. So they'd like a bad TV deal. They like to get a TV deal and then build it up. But you know, from what I've been reading, the clubs don't want to. The clubs are very reluctant to hand over, 51% to an entity that is just motivated by money and nothing else, and they probably have the sympathy of their fans by using that reason to decline an approach. But I think if the approach came via the NRL and it was from elsewhere in rugby league, it'd be much harder for the owners to take some sort of moral high ground. Oh, we're not going to sell out our game, because what rugby league wants to buy rugby league. What's your reason for not? Because the NRL clearly have more than a profit motive. You know that they make profit out of rugby league, so their interest is in making rugby league bigger. So it'd be very hard for the owners, I think, to claim anything but self-interest if they were to turn down a takeover approach from the NRL, which is why, in its own way, the next 12 months was just as exciting as this time last year when the Wolfpack were coming up to Super League, and we all thought, wow, won't that be incredible? We know how that ended, but like the next 12 months, because of these whispers about venture capital and NRL interest, and is just as exciting, for the game.
Do you think we'll ever go back to Toronto, Steve?
Oh yeah, I'm going to try to get back there. There's a few rock clubs there and some restaurants I want to go to. I think. What do I think? I've got someone sent me some stats about Toronto too, but I think it might be possible that a club might go back there playing 3 or 4 games a year and have a name like I don't. Let me put it this way: I wouldn't be surprised if we see an Ottawa style model somewhere down the track, but with the team playing half their games at. For instance, if Ottawa stayed at Hemel and played half the games at Hemel and half the games in Ottawa, then I see under that model, it could happen. So I think yes, I'd like to think the game would go back there. I mean, it really disappoints me that they didn't even get a phone call about. So you definitely don't want to play in League One. You definitely don't want to play in the Championship. You sure? No one picked up the phone. That was disappointing. And also, those of us, you talk about ivory towers and stuff. I went to games at Sheffield and where else did I go? Rochdale. I went to Summer Bash, and you guys would have done this too, and met people who had flown over from Toronto. They'd flown from Toronto to Batley or Dewsbury to watch a team, and then Batley, not so much Batley and Dewsbury, but you know what I mean. The towns of that ilk then said, "We don't like you. Don't come back." You know what I mean? It's like, it's ridiculous. The stat I've got here, which is from someone who claims to know, since COVID, UK clubs have received 300,000K to 500,000K in furlough, on average 400K UK government loan per club, and 1.2 million TV money if you're in Super League, right? David Argyle owes players and staff 1.4 million. So next time someone tweets you about, it's not a sustainable model and he didn't pay the players, et cetera, they're the stats. It is a sustainable model if they get the same benefits as other clubs, not more. And if you look at, like in Australia, new clubs get more. They get benefits. In the AFL signs players and gives them to expansion clubs. They give them the first draft pick. They give them allowances. They're allowed to pay players more because it's in the long-term interest of the sport. In the case of Toronto, they got nothing from the centre at all, and I know they stuck their hand up for that, and it was really dumb. But you have to remember that every time you say it's not sustainable.
And I think that's the difference between whether it's Toronto and whether you ever see another game there, or whether it's the principle of how do you expand into new markets? What resource do you need? What's prepared to be part of a strategy to do that? And that's the question that we haven't asked. We looked at an owner who didn't fulfill his financial commitments towards the end. We've looked at another owner who some didn't think had put forward a sufficient enough case to be granted that club to take it on. I think what we do know is that there is a market there. Now, how you exploit that, if you want to exploit that, what it would take to exploit that, what I don't know what advantages you would have to give them to establish that. That's the stuff we never want to talk about. And I think we come to a point now with, again, perhaps the NRL getting involved in rugby league in the Northern Hemisphere, where they're saying if you're showing a relative lack of ambition or resource to be able to or want to do that, then that's where we might suddenly be very interested in what's going on over there. I think the other thing as well we've got to be ruthlessly honest about is that we are not producing enough players here at the moment. We have got some really good young players, but we haven't got enough of them. I think the NRL, particularly through their Pacific programs, have almost got a surfeit of players, and they need another market where they can start feeding some of these players into. Now, some may say, well, that demeans Super League. It becomes almost the reserve division of the NRL, but our best players are going to their competition at the moment anyway, so it's just a continuation of that. And I think, again, those who are in charge of producing talent in the NRL don't want to lose it to other sports. So what do you do with it? You put it in the market that already exists. Well, to do that, you've got to have a bit of a say over that market. And I think there will be rugby league in Toronto. I think there will be rugby league in North America. I don't know what Steve's heard about the 2025 World Cup, but I would like that to be resurrected relatively soon and decide what we want to do about that, because it can't keep bouncing between Australia and England. And again, the logical and obvious place to put that is in North America. Now, clearly, you've got to do a lot of work on how you're going to do that, who's going to fund that. We've had our fingers burnt a little bit with the Denver experience, but I think Steve would say that actually that was a success. It's just that we don't have a huge amount of resource or the ability to capitalise on what might be a limited success of one game. So we move on and we ditch it. But actually, there was a market there for two teams that the locals had never heard of, a sport they'd never been to before. 20,000 fans is actually something you can really build on. So it's what we want. But to answer your question, yes, I don't think we've heard the last of North America, and Toronto will be a key city within that.
We've got to be careful we don't sort of go over old ground, because Toronto were given the heave-ho quite a few weeks ago. But a big issue in all this is the apparent conflict in policies between the RFL and Super League. So the RFL perhaps, can see some of the points that we've been discussing, that it's an escape hatch for the game in this country. It's a way for the game in this country to reach a new audience. And it is almost a blank slate as far as rugby league is concerned. And then we've got Super League, which is, even just to explain it to the NRL and to people in Australia, Super League is not a league in the way that we have them in North America or Australia. It is a collection of clubs with a marketing arm. And so Super League were handed a club they didn't want, and what's more, the RFL currently has plans to throw more clubs at them they don't want, in future, with Ottawa coming in, and who knows, Toulouse. I mean, I don't think they want Toulouse. Toulouse doesn't. They can't promote Betfred there. They can't sell Sky dishes there, and they bring no away fans. Super League is a collection of clubs. It isn't really a league in the way I understood a league growing up. So you've got this. You've got this conflict, and no one's discussed it since Toronto were tossed out. No one has really addressed. The RFL has, and it seems to have, an expansionary outlook, and Super League is growing more and more parochial and inward looking. and no one has explained to me how this conflict is going to be resolved.
Money. Offer the club owners in Super League more money, and they will find a way of accommodating what that money wants. And
that is the answer too for the World Cup. The World Cup is basically like it's the World Cup. People think of it as we're going to have the World Cup in America. We're going to have the World Cup is like a rock concert. It's like a tour. It's like I'm the manager of Kiss and I'm going out on tour, and I'm like, do you want to put Kiss on in your arena? Then it's going to cost you this much money. And at the moment, the World Cup is not as popular as Kiss. You know what I mean? No one wants to put that concert on. So at the moment, Kiss are staying home. And at the moment, the 2025 World Cup is not on because no one wants to put it on. That's it.
It's like the Commonwealth Games. We'll host it in Birmingham or something. It'll be all right. We'll find somewhere eventually. Maybe France can host it again. As we've mentioned, Toronto, and obviously we are looking to fill that spot. I'm just concerned at the minute that because everything is fought on social media, every single issue, be it large and important or completely irrelevant, we've got this phony war going on where, as I mentioned last week, celebrity endorsements are now involved, video packages. Lee have started to release their bid document a page at a time. There's a page a day they're releasing. I get this awful feeling that we're going to end up with the decision made in a couple of weeks, but people have already decided it's the wrong one based on what they've seen and not what actually has been chosen on by the panel of those who are deciding.
Yeah, I think there's that's always going to be the case. Whoever gets it, there's going to be an outcry. Clearly, I do think that conspiracy theory abounds in all walks of life at the moment, and I think a case was made very early on that because the conditions have been set out to include a certain club, that it was nailed on certain that club was going to get the decision. I wish life was as simple as that in many ways. I think Steve's right when he starts talking about, Toulouse, and what you'd have to say about Toulouse's bid is that, is it in any way different to Toronto's bid? Unless they suddenly said in big red letters at the bottom of their bid, by the way, we've got a huge television deal to bring to the table. Is that any different to what Toronto were offering? I don't know. My worry is that we're making this decision purely for short-term expediency. By agreeing to only give the club that comes up £1 million, you are almost setting a trapdoor underneath them to fail, in which case you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. But we'll see. Lee have done a 430-page document, I'm told. So if they're releasing a page a day, they'll have finished next season before we'll know which division they should have been in.
I only muted Steve. Steve, you have to unmute yourself because people would moan that you were making a cup of coffee. Can I unmute you? You'll have to do it yourself. Sorry, Steve. Yeah.
I think he was letting the cat out.
Sorry about the noise. No, I was just getting more power. So I've got
a
question for you, Richard. How long does it take how good is your Wi-Fi? How long does it take to upload this file?
It depends. Sometimes it's quicker than others.
No, but someone suggested, Phil, that Toronto should actually apply to replace themselves.
That was me.
That was Phil.
It was you. Yeah, it was you. They should apply to replace themselves because the voting system is far more amenable to them. It's 3 RFL, like Toronto.
Absolutely.
3 Super League and an independent an independent chairman. So Super League, they probably the best of the applications could be actually Toronto. But anyway, yeah, I think probably I think that there is a strong underswell of support for Bradford, and Bradford has been a basket case for the last sort of decade. Anyway, yeah.
I can't remember if you said this when we were off air last week, Phil, fully in subscribing to the view that whoever doesn't come up or whoever isn't given the place is almost in a stronger position because they can actually build a team. As great as it is to have a stadium and plans and famous people who like you, how many of these clubs, and I know many of them are signing players at the moment, have a squad which will finish 11th in Super League next year? Because if they don't, they've just done some fancy documents that will see them back down in the same division the year after.
I was having the exact conversation with John Keir as we were leaving the stadium on Friday night, socially distanced with masks on. And I said to him, from a purely Bradford point of view, would you rather be in the Championship, build up your support base, go back to Odsal in a time frame that makes it achievable for renovating it to a standard that brings it back up to Super League, but winning something so that you can take that groundswell of support with you, in the knowledge that if you're replacing a team that's being relegated, you put half your squad together, you've got your season ticket holders, blah blah blah, or would you rather be in Super League straight away? And he said, you're asking the wrong person, because, my aspiration as a coach is to always be playing at the highest possible level. So if we can get into Super League tomorrow, that's where we want to be. But I still maintain that for a club like Bradford, privately, they would rather be rebuilding in a winning situation in the Championship and gaining promotion as of right, if we're still sticking with promotion relegation, rather than being thrown in with half the money and little time and a pressure to renovate somewhere rather than play at Dewsbury, which clearly isn't fit for Super League. But that's not going to be the issue, is it? The issue is going to be on paper who offers the best likelihood of taking up the challenge. I only think there's one candidate, but just because I think that doesn't mean there is.
Super League's 12th club, good on paper, the proverbial on grass. That's what it could well be going into 2021. The excitement that we have. Benji Marshall, is he coming to Hull, Steve? Apart from the fact that Hull DML have already debunked this.
They've debunked it, have they? They've said it's not true.
Apparently.
Yeah. I have no inside information. I'm off that beat now. I only know what I read, just like you guys. So he's a good draw card, isn't he? He gets bums on seats, Benji, and he's a nice guy. So yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing him here. You know what? I actually don't like transfer. Really, you talk about sort of an old man out of touch with just wider society. That's me. I find transfer, because I don't have a favourite club, I guess, I find transfer speculation just really boring. And I know it is it's the grease of sports media. It's what gets people to click and watch and read. But it bores me stupid, transfer speculation.
Yeah, unless they're going to my club, I'm not interested.
The man who is the number one fervent fan of Illawarra Steelers says he doesn't have a team to support.
Yeah, well, they haven't signed a player in a while, Phil. So
you never lose it. You never lose it.
I heard Mark Broadhurst is coming back for one more season. That's
I think the thing about Benji, without having any inside knowledge either, is that clearly Brett Hodgson is probably a brave appointment for Hull. Clearly he has links with Benji, with the team he's just come from. Clearly one of his statements was, I need a halfback. So you, as a club, that's exactly who you want to be linked with, Benji Marshall. But if it's true that he's looking for between around 400 and $500,000 a year, he ain't coming for that money. We haven't got it.
I thought he was off to Leeds at one point, wasn't he? That was a great rumour earlier this year. That was a good one. I wouldn't be surprised if they're signing him now with everyone else is signing. And Richard Marshall, speaking of Marshalls, is the new Salford Red Devils head coach, which seemingly goes in fashion of where they've gone with Ian Watson before.
Yeah, I think served his apprenticeship, very highly thought of, as Ian Watson was when he joined Salford, that people could see the potential in him. Another good guy. I think we've had him on the show at some point, or at least I think we've all interviewed him after matches when he was at Halifax. And it's great in terms of promotion of young British coaches that they've gone for someone who they feel deserves a start at that level, rather than necessarily bringing in a name on an expensive contract who perhaps won't do a better job. So no, good to see. I don't think he was the first choice we were told. No, good luck. He's been involved in teams that have just won back-to-back grand finals, so clearly he brought something to St Helens.
4020 podcast, certainly not in the know on anything at all. Before we get on to talk about Steve's latest project, I just want to mention, well, this is something you've written about today, Steve, the Golden Boot. Now, surely, no one could have foreseen COVID-19 or anything, and the lack of international men's rugby in 2020. But surely having changed the award from the World Player of the Year to the Best International Player of the Year, then the award should be given to whoever was the best player in the Netherlands versus Germany match.
Of course it should. Of course it should, because I've spent all this time arguing with people, especially Aussies, saying, how can Tommy Makinson, he's not the best player in the world. And I said, it's not for the best player in the world anymore. And it's for the best performer in internationals. And so I've been arguing this all this time. And then finally, we have one international and it should go to the best player in that game. And they decide not to award it. And they can't say, well, it would have made a mockery of the award, because according to most Aussies, the mockery was made many years ago. But there was a women's international too this year as well. New Zealand v Tonga, I think. So, or was it Samoa? Or anyway, that should be awarded too. The women's Golden Boot should be awarded as well. Yeah.
No Australians involved, so that's the problem, Phil, isn't it?
Congratulations to your centre, Joran Schoenmaker, who was the man of the match in that game, who should indeed be. Just think what a great story it would be, though, rather than demeaning it. The fact that we're celebrating the fact that an international was played between two affiliate nations, that's a great story.
Not only that, though, Phil, like we all kind of, as rugby league fans, because we know the geopolitics of rugby league, when people say, oh, you can't play test matches this year, it's terrible this year, we'll go, oh, yeah, terrible. Oh, you can't travel. No, terrible. Football, rugby union, they're all playing internationals, right? Mm-hmm. Because their economy dictates that they must, because they earn so much money from internationals. And I go back to what I was talking about earlier about KISS and playing in an arena. We can't get anyone who wants to put our games on. No one thinks they can make any money out of our games. So as a result, that's why we didn't play this year. And that's why it was only Netherlands versus Germany. Money.
Talking of which, don't bring back the exiles.
Well, I was going to mention that. Obviously, we had the great success earlier this year in the our sister code, evil stepbrother code, where the Barbarians went off on their meeting in a pub and had to cancel their game against England. The exiles, obviously, our equivalent of, in a sense. You don't want to see them back. You'd rather see us actually play a proper international team.
I was talking about this to somebody today who is involved in one of the Super League clubs, and said, what would you think of the idea of a combined Celtic nations? And they said, why would that help? And it comes on the back of watching the documentary Once Were Lions, and what do we want of the British Lions? Well, if you've got, again, you're looking for saleable product, things that might be of interest to external investors, then selling them the idea of national teams is a lot easier than selling them the idea of club sides. But if you're going to do it just for the sake of doing it, then there's no point doing it. You're demeaning a historic badge. But if you had a way of saying, well, at the moment, Wales, Scotland and Ireland individually are not strong enough to play England, but collectively they might, and that the end game of that was you're looking for places in a British Lions team every fourth year, then as a fan, I find that a lot more appealing than exiles, because the issue with anything is, why did you stop doing it in the first place? And the reason the exiles petered out was, A, not every club released their best players the longer it went on, because there's nothing in it for them. B, we were not awarding any caps, because it was just sort of a collection of guys who happened to be here at the time. And C, the fans didn't know who to support. If you were a Leeds Rhinos fan,
boo, boo, boo.
No, but if you were a Leeds Rhinos fan and Conrad Hurrell gets the ball for the exiles, you ain't going to boo him. You've learnt to love that man. So this mate against mate stuff doesn't work. But if you start saying to Michael McAlorum, go out there and smack Josh Hodgson because one of you might be going on a tour in 4 years' time, and you were really proud to wear that Ireland shirt, and you say to Regan Grace, the last time Great Britain went, they didn't think you were good enough. Do you want to go out there and run rings around your club mate, Tommy Makinson? I think fans would buy into that. And the ultimate aim of doing that would be to get Wales, Scotland and Ireland to a position where they were strong enough to play against a full Great Britain and French team on their own 2 feet. But in the interim, if we're looking for fixtures that are purely to give Sean Wayne practice games for the World Cup, could we not have a match against the Celtic nation, the Celtic barbarians, the Celtic crusaders?
Well, the problem is that you can't, if you have England beating combined Celtic nations by 50 points in June, how do you market Ireland, Scotland and Wales in October and November?
But I don't think it would be 50 points.
Yeah, but you're taking a risk. Taking a risk. You're trying to market the World Cup, so it's better to have England playing a team that isn't in the World Cup.
But the Celtic nations aren't. What you're saying is some of the potential that could play for those Celtic nations are coming together to try and knock off one of the big guys. I'd watch that. Our Scower used to say England exiles. Well, I reckon this is the next step along from that. It's a tour trial, if you like, for further down the line. Lachlan Coote playing for the Celtic Crusaders, or I picked that name deliberately to annoy people. Up against Sam Tompkins. Why wouldn't you want to watch that? I think you could get 2 relatively evenly balanced sides, all out of Super League, or with a couple of youngsters thrown in of, perhaps outsiders of heritage, grandparentage, or whatever it is, who would make it a genuinely competitive game that fans would want to see.
I'm ambivalent about the Exiles. I'm ambivalent. I don't hate them. I don't like them. I'm ambivalent.
But they represent you. Because you're an exile.
I am an exile. I'd like, the historian in me, or the train spotter, would like to see some sort of connection to the other nationalities team. Back in, 40s and 50s and 60s. Then you start to create, a tradition, a little bit. Some great players represented other nationalities. So, but aside from that, I'm ambivalent. Yeah.
Bring back the other nationalities then. Brackets Celtic.
It's not a very marketable name, is it? You can't imagine their Twitter account, other nationalities.
I'd like to see Eddie Rombo come out of retirement to play for the other nationalities to wind up
the foreigners. Yeah. England versus the foreigners.
We also do need to take France into account in this, because one of the things that is the great sadness is that, again, they need opposition whereby they can improve as well. And I know we spoke about it very, very briefly last week about the Catalan Dragons losing their identity. I am concerned that the likes of Remy Castille and Lucas Albert will not be playing for them next year. I think, Well,
Remy Castille isn't, is he? Because he's been released now. But he's a key part of that Challenge Cup success, and will go down in history, of course.
I think it's just a culture thing. I mean, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I think teams represent a certain culture, and he was the embodiment of that, and you build around him. And I get that Steve McNamara is saying 35 and probably at the top end of the salary cap, and decisions need to be made about bringing the average age of his squad down. But to me, he's the guy you build it around and bring the young players in to learn off, and not the bloke that you get rid of. But when Catalan win the Super League next year without a single French player in the team, Steve can stick 2 fingers up.
We need to get what was the guy called the man of the match in the Dutch Germany game?
Joran Schoenmaker.
We need to get him on the show. We need to present, as we did with Scoey with that golden cap we got on eBay, because the RFL won't give him one, or International Rugby League, or whoever. It's not I don't want to blame the RFL. It's not their fault. That we need to get some like a shoe and spray it in paint and award it to him just as an unofficial one. If we put it on Wikipedia, people will believe it's true, like Bradford winning the Yorkshire Cup when they didn't a couple of years ago, and that never came back, did it? I don't think there's any more news, is there? Unless I've missed something blindingly obvious, which is possible. I've not read the paper because I'm currently in isolation.
Phil hasn't read that Australia's almost at war with China.
No, the way of healing it is for them to take on a couple of NRL games and host.
The lobsters can't get in, but
But Canberra can.
Canberra can, yeah, okay.
And now York have tagged us in a tweet. A huge thank you to Hilton York for their continued support. Now bid to become a Super League club in 2021. So it's celebrities and hotels now we're going for. So this is very exciting. Steve, you're writing another book, and this time on one of the most important times in the history of our sport.
Okay, yeah. So I'm doing a book that's called Two Tribes, about 1997 season. There were two competitions in Australia, and it's a period that most fans in Oz just sort of try to forget. In fact, if you talk to most fans in Australia, they wouldn't be able to tell you the origin story of the NRL. They just say, "Oh yeah, there were two competitions. News Limited came in, and then there's now there's the NRL. That's it. Like there's no the negotiations. People have pretty much tried to forget." At the time, 95, 96, 97, people didn't watch matches. The matches were secondary on the back to the court reports and all that sort of stuff. So basically what I tried to do is pick up where Mike Coleman's book about the Super League War finishes. A little bit different because Mike Coleman was writing in 1996, so he could actually describe the drapes and what was on the sandwiches and stuff like that, which I'm unable to do. So I've done my best to make up for that with detail and interviews. I went to see Ken Arpus on New Year's Day this year in his home on the Gold Coast. I've interviewed Jeffrey. What's his name? Jeff, the CEO of Optus. I've forgotten his name just for a second. Jeff Cousins, the CEO of Optus, who hasn't done. Neil Whittaker hasn't done a rugby league interview in about 20 years. So I sat down with him when I was back in Australia. Obviously Malcolm Reilly, or famous players, little-known players, officials. Ian Robson. I went to see. Maurice Lindsay, Neil Tunnicliffe. So about 50 interviews so far. And what I've tried to do, because I looked at this thing, Substack. Substack is basically so writers can earn money without a boss, right? So you can sell direct to readers. And so I thought, well, why don't I do this as combine this with the book? So basically, if you sign up, you get the book. It's like a pre-sale. So I'm actually, at the moment, I'm batting a post every single day. Since I started. I started on October 4, which was the 24th anniversary of the court case that allowed Super League to get underway in Australia. And I've done a post every single day since then, and I'm planning to do it until December 19, 2022, which is the 25th anniversary of the NRL being formed. I'm not going to promise to do every day, but at the moment I'm batting at one post a day. So for $45, you get all those posts, which is going back through clippings, liner notes, old graphics, videos, all sorts of stuff, audio interviews. I plan to put audio interviews up as well. You get Two Tribes when it comes out, and then you also get a copy of.
Professional, look at that.
Straight away. So yeah, I know it sounds like I've been waiting. The whole hour and a half just to do that spiel, and I didn't quite make it. But I'm enthusiastic about it. I'm very I'm enjoying the process. I had to be convinced to do it, but now I'm really enjoying it.
I mean, obviously what was I doing at the time? I was doing my GCSE, so I didn't have Sky, I didn't have any access to Australian Rugby League at the time. So this is a completely fresh period of history, because I was more bothered at the time about Wakefield trying to be merged with Castleford and Featherstone. That was the major drama for these three little towns in the north of England, who no one in Australia probably cares about. And you've got these big clubs being forced to merge and go up against each other, and the World Club Championship, which we all remember as a great concept, and Hunter Mariners and stuff like that. I'm fascinated to learn more about this period.
Well, the reason we had last Friday night, we had a game that was called a Super League Grand Final, and that was all because of basically the introduction of pay television in Australia. And this is from the period before my book starts, but basically Kerry Packer, who owned Channel 9 and a bunch of magazines, he bought the TV rights, the pay TV rights for the New South Wales Rugby League. He had no pay TV outlets. So he just bought them because so no one else could have them. And when pay TV started in Australia, at the time, the Brisbane Broncos and some of the newer clubs, Canberra Raiders, They didn't like the way the game was being run in Sydney. They thought it was too small time, too parochial, too old-fashioned, not enough marketing and pizzazz. And so Rupert Murdoch had a fertile soil to grow this idea of a breakaway competition, because these clubs were disaffected. And so, unfortunately, Kerry Packer, who didn't have a pay TV channel anyway, decided he wasn't going to sell them anyway, and I'll sue the asses off you if you deal with Rupert. And so, on the 1st of April 1995, fittingly the date, fittingly the year, because it's 100 years to the day since rugby league started, fittingly the day, April Fools, the News Limited climbed through windows and signed players on the spot, said, you've got to sign here. And then announced in the Sunday papers they'd signed a bunch of players from underneath the noses of the ARL. And what happened after that was that Kerry Packer had more of a fight than he bargained for, but he'd given the rights to the ARL to another, just to be awkward about it. He'd given them to one of the Rupert's rival pay TV startup, and they started funding a fight back to pay the players to stay with the ARL. And the thing that people don't appreciate is that in 1995, Kerry Packer was over it. He went and visited Rupert Murdoch on a yacht in the Bay of Islands in New Zealand, and said, "Oh yeah, we'll give you some programming, some movies," and shook hands on it. But Jeffrey Cousins, whose name I couldn't remember a short time ago, Jeffrey Cousins was like, "No, I'm not gonna. I'm going to keep fighting. I don't care. You guys can do a deal. I've paid for all these players. You're wrong trying to come in and steal this competition and this game. I'm right, and I'm going to keep fighting, even if you guys want to make friends." And so, as a result, we end up with 2 competitions in 1997, and it's a year that rugby league fans fetishize. You just mentioned Hunter Mariners and blah blah blah. People. It's funny, you get like, and perhaps not so much in this country because it was all about merging and it was all about franchising and all that sort of stuff. But in Australia, you get people who are like, I want to buy a Hunter Mariners jersey for $250 on eBay, and how good a player was, Barry John Mather playing centres for the Perth Reds and stuff like that, and they fetishize about it. It's like. And then you get others who are still very, very militant about it. There's like, that wasn't a test match because the ARL didn't approve it. So, the Anzac test, the first ever Anzac test, is counted by New Zealand and the International Federation, but not counted by Australia because it was the Australian Super League team in it. And some people on social media still get really angry about it. Brisbane didn't win the competition. There was no competition. They weren't in. They didn't play in 1997. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to get to this sort of unravel that as well in the book, a little bit of that sort of, that sort of dichotomy, and try to basically allow people to make their peace with what happened. And, I don't want to quote Donald Trump saying they'll find people on both sides, but, I think there were. So I've interviewed quite a few of those fine people.
And Adelaide Rams still have one of the better Twitter feeds.
They do. I actually think I got a Facebook page called Dead Club Society, and it's one of those things where you don't have to put any content up there, and people like it. Everybody's gonna like it. And I would like to actually put out every year matching the NRL gear, even go through the front door of the NRL and actually put out Adelaide Rams, Hunter Mariners, Annandale. You can get Annandale jerseys. There's a big list of defunct clubs, and I know people are doing it in this country too. They're just doing it on Facebook and stuff. So there's a big fetish there and a big market for dead clubs.
I'd have a Sydney University shirt.
Sydney University, yeah. I think they're still playing.
I think one of the smartest business ideas of this year was Elgren being reborn and releasing some shirts of dead clubs so you don't have to pay anyone any money. I think that's brilliant.
I think some of them are licensed though.
I'm sure some are. Yeah.
Joey's son, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Joey's son. Yeah. So I did a tweet last year about I can't believe you can go and buy this and the club gets nothing and that. And he actually got back to me and said, no, that one and that one is on our website. You can't buy it. That one and that one, they get a percentage. and that one, the club's dead, doesn't exist anymore. We don't owe anyone any money. So full credit to Elgar, and they're doing it by the book, not breaking any laws. Well done.
Yeah, because there are a few people out there who do sell what looks like poor quality merchandise of clubs that still exist, and I do find that a bit distasteful.
I've got another idea though in that area, because as you know, the last 3 years have been dabbling in merch. Is that you make gear for countries that don't play the game yet, like your Pyongyang pylons, and you actually do, and you half the profit goes in trust, and when they get recognised by the International Federation, you give them the money in the trust fund. Do you like that idea?
You see, that's development.
Yeah, and I reckon it's actually a 360-degree concept, Phil. I think at the time you do social media and you do a website as well, and so when they do the work, they get recognition from the International Federation, or even before, if you think they're not shysters. Some countries more likely to have them than others, I guess. But you hand them, you say, here it is, it's done. There's your website, there's your Twitter, there's your Instagram, there's your Facebook, and here's a grand that we earned selling jerseys to train spotters. I'd like to have a go at that. You know what I mean?
Well, you sort of have with Azerbaijan and various places.
Yeah, that's not commercial, is it? I kind of did that because it was cool. My problem is I think of things I'd like to do that are cool first. and then like 10 years later, it occurs to me that maybe I'd like to maybe there's a way to earn money out of it. But my first thing is, what's a cool thing to do, I'm sure that's what this program's all about, isn't it?
Never lose that. That's how we've existed for as long as we may have existed.
There is a design for Pyongyang or the pylons of Pyongyang t-shirt shirts. There are designs. I just need to get off my backside to get someone to make it, and we can make some money.
I heard it's going to be look like Hessian. Is that right? The jersey design is like a Hessian bag.
It is without a doubt it would be the greatest rugby league shirt of all time. And having seen some of those that have been released this year, it's certainly better than some of those we'll see in Super League.
There's a guy in Sydney called Matt Haynes, and he actually designs jerseys, and he gets paid like a per hour. Like he gets paid a per hour fee to do the jersey. He doesn't take a commission or anything off sales. And so there's enough work. There's enough people having this conversation that we're having now around the world to keep Matt Haynes in kind of six packs and pies. You know what I mean? So we're not alone. We're not alone. We're
all dreamers. We're as Belinda Carlisle said, and you can buy their shirt on the.
I approached Belinda Carlisle to be interviewed for the book because she played at the first round of Super League. She played at Brisbane versus Canberra in Brisbane versus the Warriors, the very first game. And then I saw her at the check-in desk at Ansett the next morning. We flew to Sydney, me in second class and her in first class, and she played on she played at Penrith versus and it was muddy and wet, and she fell off stage, and people perhaps unfairly said that she was a bit under the weather, if you know what I mean. So I'd like to put that claim to Belinda Carlisle so she can put the record straight. But I've been so far unable to contact her. She might be watching, and if you are watching, Belinda, I can be contacted at touchstonetalk@gmail.com.
I've got plenty of questions my teenage self would like to ask Belinda Carlisle if she is watching.
Questions you wouldn't like to answer?
Well, it depends. I won't say them on this program because it's a family show. I'm thinking now. I think we've spoken about everything. We need to ask Steve. Is there anything else you want to mention? And how do we give you money? You're trying to make money from Rugby League. How do we give you money? How's the Patreon going? Because I love reading everything, and I watch your show on a Friday.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Look, my big thing at the moment is Two Tribes. You go to twotribes.substack.com, and all you do is you just buy the subscription, and then I'll send you one of these. And then when the book comes out, hopefully you're helping fund the printing of it. So that's the big thing now. I've sort of I guess one thing I didn't mention earlier during lockdown is that you get more time to do things like we're doing now. So White Line Fever, my podcast, has been kind of infrequent over the years, but it's heading towards its 10th year next year. So I'm doing a all rugby league version called White Line Fever Kicks pretty much every week. You find on iTunes. And there's White Line Fever, which has got music in it as well, which is also on iTunes. And yeah, the boys will be very angry at me, John and Ross, if I don't mention patreon.com/rugby league long reads. Even the title is a long read. It is what it says on the tin. And that's been great. Well, I've got to say, the response we've had to that, when we started that, people said there just isn't a market for it. And now, I don't think it's unfair to say we've been copied, by at least two organisations I can think of. And it's good. It keeps us on our toes. We've got some great plans for like maybe being organised. That's our grand plan. We're unveiling a grand strategy. Organised.
The USP goes if you start organising yourself.
So we're so we're pretty much every day now posting on there, and we've got a weekly live stream, and we're going to have like this thing called. There's a column I do called Discord, so this is confusing, but there is also an app on the internet called Discord.
There is.
Well, yes, where you can go in and discuss what we're discussing, and things like your YouTube channel. I'm trying to amp that up as well. So it's YouTube /WLF Whiteline Fever TV. But I also know from looking at all those videos how do you get a lot of viewers and subscribers. You do a video about how you can get a lot of viewers and subscribers. so I've been watching all those, and they say don't blind people with too many links and plugs. So I'm not going to say any more. That's it.
Fair enough. What I will say is, and this is something I meant to mention earlier and I forgot, and I've mentioned it on the programme before, Super League, the RFL, whoever, should really put on their YouTube and social media channels post-match press conferences, because last week's Super League post-match press conference on our channel, which is a tiny island in a sea of content on social media, has had 716 views, 7 comments, 16 likes, some dislikes as well. And Super League can have that for themselves.
Try putting a Tonga press conference up, mate.
Well, we did.
Tonga has got 15,000,
yes.
20,000. I've got most of my subscribers on my YouTube channel are Tonga fans. I should just interview Christian Wolf once a week.
I think the most
cut that out too. Along with me going to the toilet, cut out that good idea.
I think the most popular video on the International Rugby League site is the one of people running around in on an African pitch of dry mud, throwing up clouds and smacking into each other. They're not interested in tries from the NRL or test matches that go down to the last minute. They want to see African players beating the crap out of each other.
Look, I think it'd be wonderful to have the time, and maybe when I moved here, there were heaps of things I wanted to do, and I've actually been fortunate. If it didn't involve spending a lot of money, I've been able to do a lot of those things because I've had the time and the opportunity. And one of the things I'd like to do is actually seriously do a rugby league YouTube channel that's just for YouTube. You know what I mean? That is just that has a script and good lighting, and you do interviews, and they're actually self-contained things that take time and that people will connect with, like you just described. And no one in rugby league has time to do those things because there's not enough money in rugby league. But why not have a go? So I might have a go in the next year or so, once I get the book finished.
Too busy, that's the problem, you see. Whereas, I'm too busy not doing anything to do everything I need to do.
Too busy is the only man who's ever covered two games that kicked off at the same time on the same day and been at both of them.
But isn't it? It's interesting though what you're doing at Forty20. I'll ask you a question before we finish. So you have a kind of an aim, like the stuff I was just discussing. You have that aim. We'll get our viewers to this level, and we'll get our watch hours to this level, and what's the journey like, Richard? Like, so at first you're kind of like really enthusiastic and you think you're going to get there, and then there must be lots of disappointments, and then you kind of see a milestone and you kind of strive for it. What's it like?
You completely overthought things there by thinking we've got an aim, and people think, oh, you're being facetious there, but I'm not really, because we kind of, Phil invited us along as refugees when we left proper sport for whatever reason that was, and have we ever said the reason on the show? I don't know if we have or not. But the basic reason why we left is they were going to the money ran out. Mm-hmm. The money man left. There was going to be no money, so we can either do it for no money there, or we can do it for no money somewhere else. So we took the decision to do it for no money somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because then you're in control of your brand or whatever. So would I prefer? Would I want lots more people to watch the show? Yeah, of course I would, and download the show. Is everyone happy with the content we put out? No, because we have opinions on things, don't we? Which aren't always the popular opinion. Would I like Scully on every week? Yes, but we can't have him on at the minute because he hasn't got Wi-Fi. You can't please everyone, and I think that's part of the battle is learning that you can't please everyone.
Yeah,
and even as long as you're doing something that you're happy with and you're proud of, then yes, I'd like to make money off it. But as long as we're doing something that's good within the constraints we have, then I'm happy with that.
Yeah, the hard thing too when you're kind of an independent sort of operator is the balance between the time spent creating the content and promoting it. So you might have, I see show now with podcasts, there's news angles in podcasts all the time, right? You're watching but no one writes the stories. Everyone just loves getting on the internet and talking and and interviewing someone famous, but the actual finding the time to then go back and pluck the stuff out and promote it and being a jack of all trades, being able to do everything. It's a steep learning curve. It really is, and that's one thing that I've enjoyed since I moved here is I've learned to do so many different things, and I was bad at most of them. I'm still pretty bad at most of them as well, but I feel like you that as long as I can get better, then I feel like it's worthwhile.
I'm not saying. Sorry.
That there has to be a level of integrity to it as well. I think that's the other thing. It's not necessarily about money. It's about genuinely believing that you are offering something that people might disagree with, but they enjoy the cut and thrust of the debate.
Yeah.
And I think if it's just bland, there's no point doing it. We've never tried to be that. We've encouraged opinion and people to be challenged on that opinion and back that up.
Well, the key thing is like what's missing from the mainstream, Phil, and it's you are walking around in a dark room trying to find grab hold of something that other people will find valuable. So no one is writing a story every day about the Super League war. You know what I mean? And I really didn't think anyone would read a story every day about the Super League war. But so far, the reaction has been good, and the reaction to long reads has got better as the mainstream coverage of the sport has decreased. So the less mainstream coverage of the sport, the closure of League Weekly or whatever, you know what I mean, or the suspension of League Weekly, as that has got as nosedive, the popularity of what we're doing has gone up. So is that a good thing, or are we undercutting traditional media? I guess we are, but you've got to do what you've got to do.
Is traditional media undercutting itself? Well, there's a philosophical question for you.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think we. And I'm sure Phil will agree, some of the best shows we've done in this period have been with non-big name guests who've come on and told us their stories, because they're stories that aren't being told out there. And I'm still, and I've said this on record plenty of times, the proudest thing I've been involved with has been our tiny role in the promotion of women's rugby league, because it was an opportunity we spotted and exploited while we could. I don't know if we still have the rights to Women's Super League anymore. I think we've probably given them up now. We didn't pay that 50 grand.
We're going to be the Kerry Packer of Women's Rugby League.
I hope someone makes a documentary about this, like they did about the World Series cricket. Not a documentary, a drama like the World Series cricket one. I did enjoy that. They showed it on BBC 4 a few years ago. I don't know. They obviously had someone play Richie Banner. Who would play Ray Warren in the Steve Mascord penned drama based on the Super League war?
Richard Gere. No, I don't know. Someone who's got a voice like this, I don't know. It'd be pretty difficult. Would Ray Warren be in? You're talking about the Super League war. Yeah, the problem you've got with the Super League war as a mini-series or something is that it's by the way, you can get on Vimeo. It was started, and I've been in touch with the filmmaker. There is a And I've actually quoted John Quayle from the outtakes of this documentary that was never finished. So you're not far from the mark there. But a dramatisation costs a lot of money. And when you're only hitting 2 states in Australia, and sort of the people who used to watch Winfield Cup on VHS in Wakefield and Wigan, then, you kind of, you haven't got... I mean, remember the first Kangaroos? The film made about the first Kangaroos, and one of the games that was supposed to be in Batley, there was a palm tree on the hill, so it's not at North Sydney Oval. But anyway.
That's why it's called Mount Pleasant. The Russell would do it.
Yes, well.
Fund it and Star.
Yeah, I just think rugby league needs to... There's more room for documentaries like that wonderful Once for Lions than there is for a dramatisation, sadly. It hasn't been a good one since Richard Harris, so, yeah.
And we're all pleased to see that they'll be redeveloping the nearly BAFTA award-winning set that is Bellevue.
I'm surprised, right? If that movie was as popular as a Christmas, the Christmas one they show at Christmas every year, then Fairy Tale in New York, is that it? What is it called? The one they show at Christmas every year.
It's a Wonderful Life.
Home Alone.
No. The one that's being edited this year because
Fairy Tale of New York. It's on Radio 1.
No, sorry. I was quite shocked when he's striking women in that film, right? I'm predicting that eventually those scenes will be deleted from that film. But anyway, we should go now.
I'm going to say we're getting onto a philosophical artist about do you re-edit the past? And
yes.
We do, because we re-edit the 1968 Challenge Cup final at the point where Wakefield scored the winning try, and nothing is ever said about it again.
So I thought David Hinchcliffe had joined us there.
Silence. Steve, thank you very much for joining us. A pleasure as always.
It was a lot of fun. And don't forget 2tribes.substack.com.
I'll write it in the description.
Okay.
And we need to get your mate Ross on, because we haven't had him on for a while either, since the Radio Yorkshire days.
Russell Crowe.
Oh, you won't come on. He's on the list of people I've sent an email to who have not replied. Steve, thank you very much for your time. Phil, magazine, you're working on the magazine this week. I need to write something.
Be out a week on Wednesday.
Right.
Perfect reading for Christmas by the fire when you're on your own, because you're not really allowed to be with people.
I've got to go and watch Once We're Lions so I can write about it. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, things you're supposed to do, and we'll see you again next week.